Hello there. Well, I have something different for you guys again today. In the ultimate example of this is my channel and I just kind of do what I want with it. So I'm having another interview with Kohlton Holsapple, who's the CEO of Credenzio Studios, who is making a new game called Lionhearts. If you've played Roblox, which I never have, you may have heard of, I think it's called Lionhearts Crusader, which is a game within the game, basically where you play as someone within this feudal system, and you can rise to be a lord or a king or a duke or a bishop or whatever you want, or you can just be a foot soldier and go on battles and have adventures, and maybe you can be a diplomat and sign treaties. It's a very interesting idea and something that I've never really done before. And they emailed me. They were like, "Hey, do you want to interview our CEO and talk to him about this game that we're developing?" And I like indie game studios. I like to be supportive of that industry. Goodness knows that AAA gaming could do things better nowadays, and I'm all in favor of supporting the little guy in their quest to make a game that's just good, that the players enjoy. So I sat down with Kohlton. We talked for about an hour, and now that interview is here for you guys to enjoy, to learn about the game. Maybe you'll get interested. They're running a Kickstarter right now. I think there's a demo that is or will be potentially available if you support the Kickstarter. And just to be clear, this is not sponsored. They didn't pay me for this. This is not an advertisement. It's just something that I thought was interesting. They asked me if I wanted to talk about it. I said sure. So that's what you have here today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the interview. Bye. Kohlton, I basically want to ask you to introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And what is Lionhearts? Could you introduce it to the people?
Yeah, hi, my name's Kohlton Holsapple. I'm the CEO of Credenzio Studios, the project manager of Lionhearts, which is an up-and-coming multiplayer feudal simulator. And it's a revolutionary product that's going to put players in charge of the world. So you're going to be immersed in this historical environment. At the same time, you're going to have a real impact on the world around you by making different decisions, allying yourself with different kingdoms, and then rising up the ranks either in a military sense, a trade sense, or a religious sense. So we offer all three pathways for players. You can pursue all three up to a point, and then you specialize. So you could become the Pope, and you'd be the only Pope in the whole world in the game. And you could become king, and you'd be the only king of that kingdom in the whole world. So it's all about a persistent world. It's all about players having an impact and feeling important. So when you see a king or a pope, it's like seeing a celebrity in game. And when you are one of those, it's it's even more impactful.
That's okay. That's cool. So that's kind of one of the questions that I was going to ask. Where it's like, is there an end state for the player character? Like, once you rise through the ranks, is there a point where like you'd want to start over, or like once you become king of like a given country or region, like is it kind of then just like a persistent battle to keep your crown?
I think it really depends on your goals. Like the goal is not for every player to become the king, right? Because there's there'll be max, 16 to probably 20 kingdoms. And if every player was becoming the king, then, there's just not enough, there's not enough positions to
Yeah.
go around. So the end goal is not actually to become the king. The end goal is to become a lord or a knight and contribute to your kingdom. And those are positions of power because we have decentralized command. So it's not that every soldier is reporting to the king to see what to do. They have individual lords in a feudal hierarchy that manage retinues of soldiers. And same with the military hierarchy, it's the same in the religious hierarchy and the trade hierarchy. It's decentralized. So for a player, your goals depends on what you want to do. Now, late game could be considered either being a knight, a priest, or even just an artisan or a merchant, right? Those are late game mechanics that make you a very valuable position in society. Out of those people, there'll be a meritocracy of only the most, um, I'd say, ambitious people and the most qualified will actually be able to make their way up to become king. And we've seen this already happen in our previous game, Lionhearts Crusade on Roblox. So these ideas have been tested and we know how they work.
Okay. So yeah, I wanted to ask, what was the inspiration for the Roblox version of this game, which you're now porting over to Unreal Engine? I mean, I'm sure you're recreating it. I'm not a developer. I don't know terms. But yeah, what was the inspiration for that original game?
Yeah, I think the inspiration just came out of me being a faction leader for years. So I didn't start playing Roblox as an adult. It's a kid's game. It's just something that uh, really immersed me because of how much you can do on the platform. So I actually started an assassins group back in like 2009. And I built that up, and we used to have massive raids with people. And I was very, I was very, I was like a businessman back then. Like I was very structured. Like all my high ranks would have to send me weekly reports, and if they didn't, they'd be demoted. And then they'd have to, if you wanted to enter the group, you'd have to send a written application, and we'd have a master of scholars who would review all the applications. And so we just set up this awesome hierarchy, and really it originated because we were just fighting everybody, and we were winning a lot, but there was no fairness because they were just isolated groups with their own bases and mechanics. And one might have a machine gun pointed right at the spawn point right when you spawn in, so there wasn't really balance. And so I got together with some of my other friends who were group leaders, who were actually kind of rivals at the time, that became friends. We said, let's make a genre, like was what they would call it, where we all can fight under the same rules. And that was back in like 2012, 2013. And that just kind of evolved. People loved it so much. It was a very dedicated niche community. It was so fun. They would have these, we call road battles every week, where we would fight for control of the Holy Land. We had the Templars and the Assassins and England and the Ayyubids, and they would try to take each other's bases. And at some point, like, should we make this into like an MMORPG where there's progression and stuff instead of just fighting? And, at first I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But the idea really grew on me. And so that's where Lionhearts was really born. And so evolving that group experience, which again, technically originated in 2009. So I've been doing this basically my whole life. Taking that group experience, evolving it, because at the core of Lionhearts, what's really so powerful and what's so, I'd say, charming and what keeps people come back is that community element. I can go play Assassin's Creed, I can go play a single player RPG, and I'm a part of this, coalition of this group. But it's just me, and it's a lot more lonely. And honestly, even though the graphical fidelity might be better because it's a single player game, and the mechanics and all that stuff, you can pack a lot into a single player game. But one multiplayer interaction in Lionhearts tropes all of that, because at this point you're actually interacting with the community, and you're building goals and setting the narrative yourself. And that's what Lionhearts is about. We're setting the parameters for the players to take and run with. So when there's a war in Lionhearts, it's not because me is saying, okay, England, now you guys go to war with the Ayyubids because that's what happened and we need activity. No, they do this, and they have their own political drama on their own. So you do get some weird ahistorical moments where, the Ayyubids in England might actually ally, and though that's not as ahistorical as it might sound, we allow for that element. And then like a king, like we had this guy named Leo who became king of France, and actually he was such a good diplomat that he just convinced all the other kingdoms around him to subjugate themselves under him. And he formed this super empire just based on diplomacy. And then they fought another super empire, which was like more of a militaristic conquering empire. And they had this massive world war. And it was like one of the most exciting things to think. And I'm just sitting there with like popcorn, just watching. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then they signed like a 5-page treaty at the end of it with outlining like, these territories will go here for this many days, and then you owe us this much resources. And so those sort of dynamics are what make Lionhearts infinitely more unique than a game that doesn't have player freedom like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean I think I saw something about that treaty signed by, like drafted, created entirely by the player base after this massive war. And
Right.
I think that is just super cool that, that's just, I mean, it's just pure creativity coming out of your players, right? You're allowing them this freedom. It's a sandbox to play in. You've put boundaries on it, obviously. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So myself and like my general, fan base, I guess, my viewers, are probably mostly invested in like story driven games, right? So
Yeah.
I have a lot of videos about Lord of the Rings and Avatar: The Last Airbender, and video games like God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2. These very story driven games, right, where the developers
Yeah.
set out to tell a story. And here you're kind of flipping that on its head and saying, okay, we're going to give you the tools to go tell a story. And
Yes.
I'm kind of curious, like, I've never been an MMORPG guy. I can barely pronounce the initialism. So how would you convince someone like me? Like, what would you say to me, having played mostly story-driven games, those being my favorite? What would you say to draw me into Lionhearts?
Yeah. First, it's not an MMORPG, and
Okay.
I mistakenly labeled it that. And we're realizing now it really is just not a part of that genre. It's just by definition because it's multiplayer, right?
Hmm.
But really, I've never been a fan of MMORPGs. I'm a single player story guy. You just listed my two favorite pieces of media ever. Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show of all time. Lord of the Rings, my favorite movies of all time, extended edition, of course.
Hmm.
And as far as games I play, uh, always single player RPGs.
Okay.
Zelda. I would always play Assassin's Creed, God of War. You mentioned. I love those games. And so all the elements in Lionhearts are actually trying to take the best parts of those games and put them in a multiplayer experience. And so, although somebody who's not used to a multiplayer game might not be familiar with that, I would really invite them to try to get immersed in the idea of what we're doing, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible for somebody who is, more single player oriented to transition into this multiplayer world. And if I can do it as somebody who, I'm not going out playing WoW and doing that.
Hmm.
The reason I love this stuff is because of the community. So it's about having a group of friends or meeting a group of friends and starting a retinue or doing something really meaningful, and then you're starting and creating your own quest. It does take creativity, it does take drive and commitment and passion, and we have so many features now that are going to make it a lot easier for people with jobs, and that this isn't their full-time thing to play games, to still participate and be a meaningful part of that world. And that's called the shadow system, because when your character is offline, or I'm sorry, when you are offline, your character is not. It will still be participating in the world, foraging, fighting in battles, whatever you've assigned it to do. And that allows the characters to still build the world. So when you enter, let's say you're in Thailand or something and nobody's on usually at your hour, although there'll be other Thai people online, the world will still be alive with the players that were on in other time zones. So if there's a famous bakery and you're a famous baker, then great. You, even if you work a 24-hour, or I'm sorry, a 40-hour a week job, you could still assign your character to be there at that bakery selling goods. And that's what allows this world to really be alive. And for you, even if you're a more casual player, it's fine, because the game is built to support that. You can find the role you like. Maybe you just like being a knight in a retinue. You don't want to be king. I found I'm a person that's very ambitious and would like to be the king, and I was of my own faction for a long time. But I found most people are not that way, and it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of time, and so there's a lot of roles and positions that will feel really fun and meaningful way down the hierarchy.
Okay. Now, when we talk about a knight within a retinue, and obviously you've got foot soldiers under the knights, what like are they? Is it everything going to be a player? If two countries go to war, is all player versus player? They're going to be NPCs, and they're kind of filling out the cannon fodder. What's that going to look like?
So the only NPCs would be shadows representing the characters that already exist in the world.
Okay.
So we're actually shooting for an NPC list place. So
Wow.
if you see a character doing something, you know that player is behind that, right? You know that there's a player that's directly tied to that. So this is a massive player versus player operation. So when you see a battle in Lionheart's Crusade, for example, it's totally player versus player driven. And that just makes the drama and the dynamics so much more impactful. Now in Crusade, we did have some NPC guards to supplement, sort of as a band-aid fix to fix some of the issues that we're already addressing in the new game. But it's something that we really want to try to avoid, because we feel like a player versus player interaction is much more impactful. But like, hey, let's say you're not on at 3 a.m. and a bunch of people from Thailand are raiding your base. Your character and your shadow will be there. And then the next day, your friends will be like, man, your shadow was on at like 3 a.m. last night, holding off the wave of, Ayubid invaders. And it had a battle axe out, and it was just defending the breach again. And we barely held on. Thank goodness for your for your shadow being there, right? So that's still going to be a story, and it's going to feel like your character. Because if you think about it, I think one of the issues with these multiplayer games that are player driven and why they haven't worked well in the past is because if you want to simulate a real world, people can't go offline for 20 hours a day or more, 22 hours a day, right? Because all the intricacies that require player interactions break down. So
Mhm.
by allowing players to automate those when they're not offline, it's not just a way to like infinitely grind. It's actually a way to allow the economy and the world to operate very smoothly and efficiently. And then when you're online, you can do the things you really want to do at a more efficient rate than your shadow would. So your shadow is not going to be doing things at the same rate you would. So we're still rewarding players who put more time in, but players that have less time can still keep up and participate meaningfully in the
Yeah,
world.
absolutely. So, I mean, will there be a? I was curious. Will there be a day-night cycle in the game, like when will your shadow, chop wood and then go to sleep and wake back up and resume his day? Then you come in later, or pick up for him, or how will that work?
That's I've never gotten that question. Yeah, as far as sleeping, I haven't considered that for the shadow. I just kind of considered them being just like robots, just constantly. But no, there will be a day-night cycle, and there will be things that sort of restrict what you can do. For example, like if you tell your shadow to bake bread, right? If you run out of flour and ingredients, you didn't stock enough, the shadow will stop.
Okay.
Right. So you as a player still need to come in and plug in things and make things sure things are running smoothly. Now you can have a list of set tasks that can kind of defer to,
Hmm.
and then if there's a battle, you can make sure it's always showing up to that. So even if it was baking bread, okay, I'm gonna go show up to this battle, and then as soon as you log in, it's gonna find where your shadow is, and you'll just presume doing what it's doing
Okay. Very
in
cool.
that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the idea. Again, it's not something I've really done in a game before. Well, in different games in a different way. But I love the idea of telling your story through just the events of the game, right? Because any game that you play, right, any event you can have is like there is a story to be told there. So one of my favorite games of the last, I guess it's been more than a decade, but it's XCOM, the more recent
Yeah.
one, the 2012 game,
My buddy,
2015, and the
my buddy loves that game.
yeah, I mean, there was the squad element, right, where you can name your soldier, and as Monsters Inc. tells us, once you name it, you start to get attached to it, and
Yep.
so you have the squad of soldiers. They rise up through the ranks as they fight, and then they die horrifically because the alien rolled a nat 20 essentially and blasted them with one shot. But it's still this remarkable dramatic story that gets told, even though the actual narrative as the game tells it is pretty bare bones, right? Because it understands that the real story here is your squad and what happens to them and the choices that you make leading them straight into a massacre. Bump my mic a little bit, and all that. So yeah, I mean, and that's. But you're going like full bore for that with Lionhearts here, right? I assume there's not going to be any cutscenes or any voiceovers. It's just the players.
Well, I mean, we might have some voiceovers for like war cries and stuff if they choose, but I'm hoping like proximity voice chat and stuff takes over.
Mm-hmm.
We will have stuff like the prayer system. So when you're actually doing a prayer, your character will be saying it out loud,
Okay.
and you could do prayers as a group or blessings as a group, which kind of acts as like a soft mage or magic system. It's going to be bound to historicism, but it's not fantasy, but it kind of fills that role. If that makes sense, like
Yeah.
as a support class, with a lot of other features and cool things to be involved.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that I saw the little bit about that. I was like, okay, so you're kind of integrating it into the story. It's not just for like the religious track. It's for kind of for everyone.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
The prayer system is like available to all, or it's
Well,
just for the religious track.
like I said, people can pursue all three paths up to a certain point.
Okay,
So at the very beginning of the religious path, you'll learn some basic prayers. And
gotcha.
so almost anybody, if they progress far enough, will just do that as a way to progress. But um, the idea with the prayer system is actually to teach people these real prayers from scripture and history, and then they can take that to their personal life if they wish. But also, it's a much more immersive element because when you're trying to represent this period of history, it's a very religiously fervent period,
Hmm.
and that sometimes gets lost in media. Or I think a lot of times games or media try to check the religious box without actually doing anything with it. Right? They're going through the motions or they're saying certain things, but there's not really any substance behind it, and I think that's really dead. I think that's like a dead world. I don't really appreciate that. Although those games do other things very well, that aspect to me seems to be really a misrepresentation. So if you're role playing as a crusader, think about it. Okay, you've abandoned your whole life. You probably sold all your belongings for maybe a chance at like some land in the Holy Land, sure, but almost undoubtedly this was a religiously motivated act, whether it was misguided or not. And so when you're trying to role play as one of those characters, or let's say a Saracen who's having their home invaded by this these heathen invaders, right, that believe something different than them, right? Religion is motivating that. And so not having that aspect fairly represented in the game and accurately, you can't make a Crusades story without that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, uh, I lost my train of thought there. Um, so how many factions were there in the game? I know there's the Crusaders, I guess the
Right.
Templars. As you mentioned, the Saracens, the English, the Iobits. I don't know much about them.
Yeah, so we have 16 in the Roblox game. We hope to
Okay.
work our way back up to that in the new game, but we're probably going to just start with a few, depending on how big it scales. So, with our upcoming Kickstarter campaign, which actually is probably launched by the time you guys see this,
Yeah, it will be.
um, yeah, so depending on how much we raised and what development cycle stance we're in depends on how many factions will be. But we're going to start with the Templars and the Ayyubids. The Ayyubids are Saladin's faction, so that's the main Saracen Crusader counterpoint faction. And then there's also going to be the Kingdom of England. There's not going to be a Crusader faction per se. There's a lot of factions who would be considered Crusaders.
Right.
And then you have stuff like the Byzantines or the Eastern Romans. The Cypriots, the Teutonics, the Hospitallers, the Seljuk Turks, the Assassins, which were a historical faction, and I'm really excited to put. I'm so excited to put those guys in because that's like a now. Oh my gosh, we just did that group just had our 15-year anniversary last November, so that'd be a
Nice.
15-year dream fulfilled to keep preserving that legacy. But yeah, it's really going to have something for a lot of people who are interested in different cultures. And so we're going to try to accurately and fairly represent each culture and religion. And if you're more interested in the Byzantines or the Saracens, or you don't have to be a Crusader. A lot of our marketing material is pointed at the Crusaders because we just have to pick one. And
Mhm.
when you have limited resources, you can't market everything. And obviously, the Crusader one is probably the most marketable at face value. But in Lionhearts on Roblox, the Lionhearts Crusade, each faction has had periods of dominating the map or taking a back seat, and it goes through cycles. So Templars might get more recruits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the most skilled.
Mhm.
And they don't win every war. They far from it. They lose a lot.
So how
Same
large
goes with
is
these.
the? Oh, sorry. How large is the map? Because I know the focus seemed to be on the Holy Land, on Jerusalem.
Yeah.
But in one of your early statements, you talked about the Kingdom of France kind of subjugating the countries around it, going to war with another empire. So I
Yeah.
mean, that seems like all of Europe is in play.
Europe's in play, but they're abroad. So in the Third Crusade, which is where this is set about that time period, Philip II of France and Richard I of England sailed to the Holy Land, and they brought their armies, and they had their own holdings there. So we're bringing their kingdoms to the Levant. So when France goes to war with the Holy Roman Empire, it's in the Levant.
Hmm.
And until we expand into Europe, which we might, that's how it operates. So when we
Okay.
say Acre is the capital of the Kingdom of France, it's the capital within the Holy Land. That's where
Gotcha.
their base of
Okay.
operations. And so they're all vying over Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem it's the meta narrative conquest point of a kingdom's life cycle, right? So they want to own Jerusalem, become king of Jerusalem. That's the goal,
Hmm.
if there is one. And so uh, that's what players and people are going to be fighting for at a macro level. And at a micro level, you're progressing your character, you're trying to build up your retinue, and you're trying to support your kingdom.
Okay. So I mean, it sounds like there's just a lot of different visions for what a player could be, right? Your goal
Yeah,
might be to reclaim Jerusalem or take Jerusalem back after being reclaimed. That's the that's your victory. I think that I get, like you said, on a macro level, you might want to see Jerusalem change hands a dozen times over the course of a year, just to see
yeah,
the
right.
shifting tides of the game. But someone else's goal might just to be the most well-renowned artisan or
Yes,
craftsman of a particular region, and just like try to dominate his competitors, beat all the other blacksmiths and bring in
right,
swordsmen from afar. Is
right.
an
I mean,
accurate kind of representation?
yeah, for sure. So, like, blacksmith's a good example. So, within the game, there are these trade trees that get very sophisticated. So, you might enter in as a blacksmith, but if you want to become a bladesmith or a jeweler or something further down the line, you have to progress that way. So, let's say you're a master jewel crafter, right? You might be the only one in your area. You might be super valuable. And so, although you didn't become a lord, lords are begging for you to come to their area because you provide so much value for their retinue, for their kingdom. And same with being like a renowned bishop or, any of that. Like each of these things have value. So instead of it just like I said, remember when I said, people just check the box,
Mhm.
right? Instead of like a priest just being there and be like, what do I do? I'm just like in these robes. I guess I'll do like a role play blessing and then, just like because it's cool.
Mhm.
No, like if a faction doesn't have the religious element fleshed out, they will be overmatched by factions that do because these give actual benefits and they play an actual crucial role. Same with trade. So if everybody goes into military, which a lot of people are going to want to do, but a lot of people are not. If everybody goes in the military, you might have the best fighters, but you ran out of arrows because you didn't have anybody crafting them, or you don't have the best weapons because you didn't have anybody as a bladesmith who knew how to make a cast Damascus sword. And so you go to a battle and you might have more men, but you're totally outmatched because they've supplemented. And guess what? Somebody attacked you, you held it off, but they damaged your walls. Well, we don't have any craftsmen to repair the walls. So next time they attack, we're done. Right? It's all about this establishing this meta of what's needed where. So you might still have the majority of people, going through that military path, becoming knights. And that might still work. You don't need to be a perfect split, but you do need people in those roles for things to sufficiently work as far as making sure your kingdom can survive and thrive.
Okay. So when you talk about becoming, a master jeweler, blacksmith, craftsman, etc.,
Yeah.
how much is it up to the player's skill or just like the player's time invested in the game, right? Because when I think of working up a skill tree, I think, okay, you just gotta, you gotta craft 1,000 swords, and then you're a master, or build 1,000 walls, and then you're the tip top, carpenter. I mean, is that the goal, or is there some element of like selecting the right
Yeah.
path, the right skills, knowing the right technique
Right.
somehow? I'm just kind of curious how that will fit in, so it's
Good.
not too grindy. Obviously, grinding is kind of unavoidable when you're learning skills. I mean, that's accurate to real life, but just kind of curious your thoughts and your philosophy on that.
It's a really brilliant question, and here's why. Because unlike a typical MMO, and that's why we're not an MMO, the combat's super skill based,
Okay.
and it's a ton about timing. So in the combat, you might have the best weapon, but there are people in the Lionhearts Crusade game where I could take the best weapon in the game, and they could take one of the worst weapons in the game, and they would win. Because it's all about timing and directional and parry windows and all that stuff. So similarly, there are mechanics in the trade tree and the religious tree that make it not just a matter of time invested, but also, skill. However, the time investment also transfers to skill. So instead of you just sitting there, clicking something all day,
Mhm.
we do directional based mechanics. So the better you get at reacting and memorizing, like in the prayers, for example, like a bishop's also going to have to become a bishop, you're going to have to memorize a lot of prayers, right? And that is a skill.
Mhm.
And that is a skill. Because if you want to pull out a blessing that, let's say you're about to bless the army before it goes to battle, you have to pull out a super sophisticated, let's say it's 100-word blessing, right? But it gives a great buff. It gives a great advantage, right? Not every soldier is going to be able to do that, right? And it's going to require timing. It's not just something where you can just pull it up on your other monitor and be fine, right? Like there are going to be methods that ensure, like, no, this person actually knows what they're doing here. And then in trades, like if you want to craft a sword, you're going to have to do a mini game to hit the sequences right, and those are going to get more complex. And so when you are crafting something like a cast Damascus sword, it's not just that you have the experience or like a level requirement, like, oh, you have to be level 32 to craft this. It's going to be a lot more sophisticated than that. And we don't actually have levels or experience. It's all about the
Okay.
feudal hierarchy.
I
So
see.
when you become a merchant, that is like leveling up,
Mhm.
and only merchants can list things on the market, so you can gain access to better things as you level up. That is the progression.
Okay. Right. So the primary progression system, from what I understand, is you gain, was it reputation or renown,
Favor.
favor,
Yep.
and then like that's kind of what you do that. How, like, say you want to join the military. What's the first thing you're going to be doing to gain favor?
Yeah, so if you were to join the military, you'd start out as a page. And essentially, the first thing you would be doing is learning how to fight and performing certain tasks. Then, when you go to a battle, you gain favor by fighting. So let's say you kill an enemy in a battle, there you get some favor. In trade, if I craft something or if I cut down a tree, the faction needs more lumber at the stockpile. So I'm going to trade that lumber in for favor. Or in the religious field, let's say I do a prayer or I perform a confession, those things will transfer to favor too. So it what happens is that across all three trees, there are different things that gain you favor in your kingdom, which then can be spent on the three trees.
Okay. So what happens if you're a page and you go into battle and the first thing you do is die?
Well, it's not a permadeath game, so you will respawn, and actually respawning mechanics will be based on how much food you've collected. So in a player versus player battle, like a persistent one, which I said they're all PvP. So what I meant is in a persistent conquest battle, pages probably won't be there because it's too intense. But if you haven't stocked up enough bread, people can't respawn. But if you have enough food stocked, you can respawn. We have skirmishes, which are a soft core version of the conquest. So you could go sabotage a wall, you could go raid a granary, do stuff, and you might just be fighting shadows at that point, and that's going to be a lot easier for a page. Similarly, at the lower levels, we're going to have training mechanics and stuff that allow you to gain favor and level up without having to be punished by full-fledged PvP. Or when you're a knight, you can enlist in a tournament. You can earn favor that way. Or you could go collect taxes for your lord. So there's a lot of different things you could do.
Again, tournaments, just like that's all organized by the player. Whatever lord, he's going to organize the tournament. He's going to ask for the taxes we collect.
That one needs some game mechanics to properly function. Okay. So a player would start it and organize it that way, but we'll need a system for that too. The thing is in theory, players could do whatever they want, right? But you need to actually have support systems. Otherwise, it's just going to fall flat and it's kind of boring. It's like the games that promise, oh, you can do anything. And then you get in, it's like a big empty map. And it's like, yeah, I can do anything in this big empty map. But what do I do? What's the story? What's the narrative pushing me? Mm-hmm. And the narrative here is, rising up in your kingdom and supporting your kingdom. It's pushing you upwards, up the hierarchy.
Okay. So, yeah, how have you, what have you done to kind of seek that balance between, leading the players, by the hand and just taking your hand off the back of the bike seat entirely and letting them fall over because you didn't put any training wheels on the bike? What are your training wheels that you've kind of fixed, affixed to the bike? And how did you come to think these are what we think the players are going to need and want to actually get enjoyment and fulfillment out of this game?
Yeah, as a developer, you have your intuition, and it's almost always wrong, and it gets better over time. And so the reason I know the balance is because of years of trial and error and making mistakes. And first, I thought the game, if I just I did, the reason I'm comfortable making fun of it is because that's what I did. I was like, oh, I'll just give the players a big map and a sword, and they'll figure it out. And no, they don't figure it out, right? Some of them do, but that's you want the game to be accessible enough that somebody doesn't have to work their ass off to just make it fun, right? So they have to present the player with opportunities. So as far as the training wheels, you want to start with a ton of support and I just had my firstborn son. I'm sure when I teach him how to ride a bike, right? How do we learn how to ride a bike? Okay. Does your dad just put you on a bike and just, okay, I'll ride to the mailbox back? No, he's gonna put you on, he's gonna guide you, he's gonna do that 10 times, 50 times, and then slowly he's gonna start taking the hands off, back off, right? And then one time you look back, you realize your dad's not even there anymore, right? That's not too dissimilar to how you should make a game, right? And every game does that with good onboarding. And the key to that is keeping the game engaging early on. You don't, making a huge complicated game sounds nice, but to a new player, man, their threshold is super low for what they will tolerate. They think it all sounds nice, but as soon as you show them one paragraph of something to read, they check out, they're out. Especially on this is why Roblox has really taught us well, because they're a bunch of free-to-play games, and you can be in and out of one in 10 seconds, right? There's no investment. It's not like a download, right? You've just downloaded the Roblox client, right? So you are competing for people's attention. So if you mess something up, you get punished, right? Like a Civilization 6 tutorial in Roblox, that game would die because there's like 3 hours of on-screen messages and you're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. So how do you change that in a game that's so complicated, in a game that's so ambitious? All right. When you join the game as a serf, you really don't need to be worried about global politics, all right? You need to be worried about getting that wheat to the granary, right? I'm going to go get that wheat. I'm going to cut it down and I'm going to bring it to the granary. That's my goal right now, right? Okay. And then, oh, I'm going to learn how to swing the sword, right? And making each part of that compelling is really the challenge. Because some people, they think they want to go right into the hardcore stuff, but when they do, they quit because they get overwhelmed. So it's a delicate balance of hand holding them enough so that they know what to do, while still keeping them interested, keeping them engaged for later. And it's a very difficult balance as a game designer, especially with a game that's this ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely noticed like survival games do that, right? When you
Yeah.
drop into something like Subnautica, it's like, okay, find food, right? Catch a fish, right?
Yes.
Find a way to filter water or whatever it is, and
Right.
then then it slowly takes you to, okay, now you're building a base, now you're building vehicles, now you're exploring the
Yep.
furthest reaches of the ocean and go crazy, which is eventually, from the sound of it, kind of what you're saying to these players. All right,
Yeah.
you've learned, you've gone from chipping at rocks with a pickaxe to forging very simple tools to forging blades, and now you're crafting crafting weapons for a whole army that's attempting to conquer its neighbors, and
Exactly.
engage in all sorts of political intrigue, which, yeah, is a very
Yeah.
very interesting concept. But I love that you said that. Yeah, you gotta start small, right? You gotta ease people in, because
Yeah.
just dropping someone into something that they're not familiar with is so overwhelming. Civilization is so bad at that. It's
Yeah.
like, I have
Yeah.
no idea what any of this stuff is. Why are my people unhappy? I don't know. Like,
But you know why people deal with it?
it's a
It's
great
because
game.
one, it's a great game, and two, they paid $60.
Yeah.
So you're like, you know what, I this is boring, but I'm gonna sit through a few minutes of tutorials, but I just paid $60 on this, right? When you're dealing with a free to play game, which we were, you don't have that sort of grace.
Mm,
Like players do not give you that grace,
yeah.
right? So actually, the game being paid on Steam is going to do it a big favor because it's going to give players a little more patience. Um, you mentioned survival games. I actually think this game is kind of like a faction survival game. Like it's going to have a lot of those elements. Um, and I think that, like collecting wheat doesn't sound fun, but like when you're hunting for a fish in a survival game, like it depending on what you're doing, it could be fun and engaging.
Yeah.
And the thing is, instead of it just being like a meaningless tutorial, the kingdom needs wheat, it needs grain, it needs these things. So you're immediately contributing to your kingdom. And just like a feudal hierarchy, it's a triangle, right? Not a pyramid scheme, but it's a triangle. So there are a lot of people at the bottom, and those people are essential. They're collecting things, they're doing things. And you don't actually need 50 kings, right? Because the king is doing a certain amount of delegated tasks. So in that way, at every level, you're an essential component in your kingdom's success. And then when you branch out and you know, you'll be a part of the national retinue under the king when you join. But if you have a buddy, and you want to join his retinue, now you're really contributing for his retinue, right? Instead of it's just like this pie in the sky kingdom, like you don't really care about, you don't know. It's like no, it's your buddy, and and he needs this grain because the king's going to tax him later, and he wants to keep his land, and so the meaning is really at a local level, which I think is going to be pretty awesome.
Nice. So with the, when you are at that local level, it's just you're a serf, or you're a, apprenticed blacksmith, or whatever. Are there consequences if you fail at your duty? If you don't collect enough wheat, if you do shoddy work, if you just don't do work, can you get thrown in prison?
Well, we're not thinking of a prison system, although it's been brought up many times. Um,
I imagine that would be
no,
very engaging for the player if they're just sitting in a cell.
no, and it's not. Here's where it become more consequential. If you're an important knight for a lord, and you're supposed to collect taxes or do something, and you don't, that lord can make the decision. Okay, well, you're not my number two anymore. You've been offline for 3 months, all right? Like, and Gary over here has been grinding, and he's great. So I'm gonna replace you. You're not gonna not be a knight anymore, but you're gonna lose certain responsibilities and privileges that have to be fulfilled by players who are active, right?
Mhm.
But at the serf level, I mean, you're a serf. Like, dude, no, like if you don't do something, somebody else will, right? You have to elbow your way into the system.
Okay.
It's a meritocracy, right? Like you're just punished. No one's gonna throw you in jail. And like systems like that and banditry and crime, they're just things that right now I'm rejecting on the face of as far as contributing to the actual gameplay loop. Because the game's about contributing to your kingdom, and when you're committing a crime or you're doing something that would be jail worthy, you're not gaining favor.
Hmm.
Certainly not getting favor for doing those things. And if you're not getting favor, it's not really doesn't have to do with the core loop. And so although those things sound cool, they don't actually contribute to the game and they'd be a distraction.
Okay, so the focus is very much just on like the positive, right? What are you doing to contribute to your kingdom,
Yes.
right? And if you don't do that, you don't do that. You're just not moving up. You're just kind of refusing to engage with the game as it's designed, really.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Just like if you stop playing, God of War, you're not going to get further in the story. You might wait a year and then come back. You're still in the same spot you were, right? But you didn't beat the game, right?
Gotcha.
You didn't get the new weapon. You didn't get to
Yeah.
the new area. So
Okay. Um, so with these factions going to war with each other, is there a chance that like one faction could be wiped off the map?
yeah, and that's happened. But what I will say is there's always chances to rise from the ashes. And so what happens is these factions get conquered, and then they revolt. They take their land back. Also, people are tied to the land. So when your lord gets conquered by another faction, he can try to he can either give up his land and stay with his original faction, or he could maybe be given an opportunity to swear allegiance to the new king that conquered him. It's like, okay, well, I conquered you. If you want to keep your land, want to keep all the nice things you have to swear allegiance to me. And so in that way, it's a lot less punishing when a kingdom goes down, because people are more tied to their local land anyway. But when a kingdom does go down, there's still going to be ways to participate, and it's called being annexed or subjugated. And basically, now you're a part of that empire. So it does suck. It definitely sucks for the king,
Yeah.
but everybody else, you can still keep progressing and doing things the way you were.
And does that like I mean I assume that's a pretty significant historical tie-in, right? Like I don't know. You studied history, right? That was your major
Yeah.
out of college.
Yep.
So like is that was that the experience for the farmers and the serfs and the peasants when their
Well,
land was conquered?
if they weren't beheaded, if they weren't beheaded or burned in a big pile, or
Is that a
yeah, I mean,
possibility in this game, or are you staying away from
no,
that? It's too
because
dark.
because there's not permadeath,
Yeah,
and at the end of the day, if something's realistic but it's not fun, it doesn't matter.
fair enough.
And so you have to wiggle around some of these things.
Hmm.
Um, and there are various solutions that we've tried and we know that can work for those types of things. I think ultimately, when you're talking about like a historical tie-in, right? If it was a permadeath game, it'd be a lot different,
Yeah.
right? The progression would be a lot faster, and it would fix some of those issues. But I just don't think it would, I don't think it would be as fun and engaging as having a character that you progress and ascend for, a long time. And
Hmm.
um, so, I'm not saying there won't be some permadeath akin elements at points, but nothing explicit like
Yeah,
that.
makes
So,
sense.
um, and plus, administratively, like let's just talk it historically, right? If I come and conquer your land, right? I don't know your land, right? I can import a bunch of my administrators and a bunch of my people to work it, but then I don't have them work in my land, right? There's
Hmm.
a limited amount of people. And so when I conquer an area, yeah, I might kill the armies, I might depose of the king and all that. But the people are going to know how to work that land best are your people. And so the best thing to do would be get them on board and assimilate them into your empire. That's what the Romans did. That's why the Romans had an empire that lasted 1,000 years, right? Because or 1500, I guess, if you include the Byzantines, right? So they had a system where they would conquer you and they were brutal, and then you could become a citizen. And when you were a Roman citizen, you were a part of the empire. right? And eventually, you could even be a part of their government, right? Now, that was not every kingdom operated that way, right? But the Mongols, another example, if you surrendered to the Mongols, they would be very kind to you and they would let you keep your religion. They would let you keep a ton of stuff. But if you fought them, they would come in and they would kill everybody. And then they would wait 3 days and then they would come back and find everybody that was hiding that came out and then they would kill them again. So there were different ways people did things. Um, but, ultimately depends on your goals. If you just want to wipe an area clean, maybe you just want to come in, burn all their farmlands, make it so they can't, like what Rome did to Carthage, sow their fields with salt and, destroy them and make sure they can never rise again. Well, they'll be able to rise again because it's a game. But if you want to really hamper their threat to you, you can do that, right?
Okay,
or if you want to assimilate them into your empire and have them be a productive output, right? It's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of time, which is why empires kind of naturally will crumble over time because they're an administrative burden. You've got a bunch of people under you who don't want to actually fight for you. And so factions that have maintained long-term empires, it's a big hassle. And I kind of like it that way because I think it's an overpowered mechanic, and I think having natural limits like that is really good.
Yeah.
And if somebody's really skilled, and there have been people really skilled, like that diplomat king I told you about earlier, Leo, and they form an empire and they're able to hold it, that's because they've done something really unique and they've used a lot of cunning. And it's not going to last forever, but they've done a really good job.
Yeah. So I take
what we actually see is
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say what we tend to see more super alliances, less than conquering. If I have friends and like I can form, it's like the Axis and the Allies or whatever. It's like a group of nations that they're all individual nations, but they're part of this pact, and that's a lot more common.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I would think that it's your goal to just see the landscape of the game, continually shifting, right? You don't want to see it static because that just seems like it'd be a lot less fun if there seems like there's no real possibility for it to change because someone's been in power for so long.
It depends. Like leaders come and go pretty quickly. And that's kind of true in the Roblox game. Like activity kind of dies off if there's a period of peace, and then there'll be a global war, and there'll be hundreds of people on, and it'll be crazy, right? But I think the trade and the religious mechanics and the tournaments and stuff like that, I actually think if there's not a global war, things are still going to be very fun because there's so many things to do outside of that in Lionhearts on Steam. And global wars will be like it's like a huge news event. Like you go, oh, we went to war with the Holy Roman Empire. Like now and then it'll be an extra motivation. But like the game is still going to work without those wars.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So, and on the topic of death, I assume that if you get, higher up the chain, like death becomes more consequential, right? Like if a lord dies in battle or a king is assassinated, right? Are they just going to respawn? I would think that has to have some serious implications.
It totally depends. Like I said, so it's a logistics problem. So if you want to attack this is another reason why like conquering is going to be difficult. And it should be difficult because it's so punishing for the loser. Right? So defenders get an advantage, and attacking requires a ton of logistics. So you have to get enough supplies, you have to caravan them across the map, and if you run out of supplies, you can't continue your campaign. And so every time a soldier dies, it costs food, right? So you better have a really good plan because that castle has 1,000 loaves of bread stockpiled, and they've got 100 people guarding it. And they've got enough arrows to last a year because they've been waiting for your attack. So you better have you and your buddies and everybody, and you better be ready to take this thing on. And there are capital duchies, and then there are just regular duchies. And so a capital duchy falling is a much bigger deal because that's the kingdom, right? That's the seat of the kingdom. Whereas like these side duchies, they'll trade hands more frequently, and they'll have less time to stockpile because they're changing hands so much. So they're using up their materials a lot. So that'll prevent like a Cold War issue where we've all got a bunch of items and nobody actually attacks. But like if a king dies, because he can respawn, I mean, he can just respawn. As far as like an assassination mechanic, that'd be more of a specific mechanic that the assassin faction could do. That would kind of eliminate a world leader for a time or nerf him or do something under certain conditions. It wouldn't just be like a regular battle death, Because like in the Crusade game, like kings lead their soldiers to battle and they die all the time because that's part of it. And people try to kill them. Like that's like it's like a stream snipe thing. Like anytime I play, I can't have fun playing the game too much on my main account because everybody tries to kill me immediately. Right? So and the kings have their bodyguards and all that. So but extra consequence for dying in the battle. I mean, first of all, you have to hope that you can respawn because there's enough stuff, and then you're not on the front lines leading the men. So they're just natural consequences every time you die, especially with like a live system. Like you don't want to die because you lose a life, and you might only have a certain amount of those in that battle.
Okay. So would having the king at the front lines have any like in-game buffs for the soldiers around him, or is it more just kind of the real world psychological effects of having your faction's king there, or your leader, your lord?
I think more the latter.
Okay.
I'm not against the opposite, but like I said, just naturally happens now. Like when you're in a battle, it's the middle of the night, and you think all your buddies have abandoned you, and you just got a couple people, and you're holding off this onslaught, and then the king shows up, and he brought 50 dudes. Like that's you just get like that's we don't have to add these mechanics because they just naturally happen
Okay.
sometimes. And the king's going to be even more important than they are in the Roblox game, so it's just going to be naturally an elevating effect.
Cool. All right. Well, I have a couple more questions, and then I will let you go, and I have to get some things to get back to. But basically, my last real question, I guess, is just how do you view this game? How is it fitting in like our world of modern gaming, or the state of the video game industry? What do you think this game really brings to the table?
Great question. I think it's a total breath of fresh air. I mean, we've been, these guys are my colleagues, so I'm not gonna, totally bash on them. But there's been a ton of games that, like I said, they try to check a box. You know, wouldn't it be cool to have this setting? Wouldn't it be cool to have this? But are they really doing something unique? Are they really putting you in a awesome environment? I think these indie games coming out are doing that, and a lot of people are running to indie because these A games just honestly have been politically compromised. They've been ideologically compromised. Um, they're not putting the consumer first. If they did that, we would get amazing games, but they're not, and that makes me happy because I'm an indie dev, and that means I get a chance to show what we can do. And I think a lot of games like this have been proposed, but the difference is, those games were pie in the sky, and we've been working on this for like over a decade. We've been doing it, and so what differentiates us is our commitment, our passion. We're players first. Our tenets are to serve our users, to serve the history, and I really think people are tired of people are tired of being lectured. People are tired of being told this or that. They just want to experience this historical setting. And that's what we're going to allow them to do. We're not going to put value judgments on it. And we're going to let them experience it. And, for all the glory and all the downsides of what being in part of a historical event is.
Awesome. Okay. And then I guess my last little bit is, if you want to, take a minute to tell the people about the Kickstarter and your what you guys are looking forward as you continue development of the game. Go on ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our Kickstarter's live now. Hopefully, we've passed our minimum goal by now. But each pledge offers awesome rewards. These are, I mean, I just spent all day yesterday making our rewards chart, and it's like, it's 8,000 pixels tall, so it's gigantic. How many rewards you can get per tier. And they do give you a good starting point in the game. They give you an advantage to start because we can't start everybody at zero because it's a hierarchy game. So if you want to support and help this game come to life, you will get rewarded. And these are awesome rewards. It's on top of cosmetics, all sorts of things. And you get to support an indie studio. We have an office here in Colorado. I've got 5 guys working full time, want to put food on the table for them. And you're supporting an indie studio that's really dedicated and passionate. So if you want to support awesome content and independent content like this, it would really like we need your support now. It's huge.
Okay. Well, guys, check the link in the description if you are at all interested. I'll have to actually remember to put the link there. I'm bad about that. Um, but yeah, Kohlton, thanks for coming on. Like I said, I'm new to doing the whole interviewing thing and just kind of talking with people who are passionate in this space. But that is genuinely something I love doing because we need more creators who are doing just generally creative stuff, right? Who are really trying to tell a story, or I guess in this case, kind of let players tell a story, let people, um, be inspired, and feel like entertainment is more than just getting the message or topic of the day or whatever the
Right.
thing is crammed down their throats, or just being fed the same garbage over and over again. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to checking the game out. When there's going to be a demo release, and you're kind of start to build the game with player feedback, correct? Is that happening?
Yeah, so the demo, right now we're just wrapping up a few things on it. We're not 100% sure when it's going to be released. It might be released right when the Kickstarter opens, but we're hoping to get it out as soon as possible.
Cool.
At the very least, we're going to have a ton of You can check out a ton of in-game footage. I've included some for you in that packet I sent over,
Yeah.
so you can show them now on the screen or
Cool.
whatever you want to do. But man, I just appreciate your content. Thanks so much for what you're doing, and yeah, man, we're gonna try to do the same thing in our own creative space. Is really try to tell a story and get people excited about something new.
Cool. Well, Colton, again, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the game.
Thank you. Yeah, me too, man.
I'm sitting down again. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I know I had a good time chatting with Colton about Lionhearts, and I've made a pledge to the Kickstarter. If you want to do the same, the link is in the description. I'm intrigued by the idea. This is something new to me, and I like enjoying new things. I love discovering new stories, even if they're ones that aren't told me, that I kind of create myself. So again, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope we'll see each other in the game at some point. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, thank you for sticking with me as I try new things, trying my hand at interviewing and speaking on the fly, which is why this intro or outro is as long and winded as it is, because I don't have a script. So anyhow, God bless. I appreciate you sticking around watching the interview, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.